Hi, I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading, and with each hunting season, we receive a lot of questions here, and as does just about everybody, it seems like, about leaving your muzzleloader loaded overnight after a day of hunting. Today, I hope to answer some of those questions by putting black powder to the test. Can we leave a Flintlock muzzleloader loaded overnight? Is that load going to go off the next morning when we line up on that trophy buck? I've got some Swiss 3F traditional real black powder here. I've got a 495 round ball with some lubed with RMC Oxyoke's Wonder Lubed patching. And we've got our InvestArms Gemmer Hawk in here. You can see us build this at ilovemuzzleloading.com or at the video channel wherever you're watching. This is a really good traditional Flintlock muzzleloader, and I think it's going to be a good representation for us of what you might have at home when it comes to Flintlock muzzleloader hunting. To put this to the test, we're going to load up this muzzleloader and let it sit here outside overnight to see if the load is going to go off the next morning. So when I took my muzzleloader out this morning, this InvestArms Gemmer Hawken, just as many of you should, I ran a few clean, dry patches down the bore to clean up any oil or residue that was left over as this sat in the safe from the last time that we had it out. And I verified that the touch hole is clear with my vent pick this morning. Now, you can load and fire off a couple shots to dirty up your barrel, but I'm pretty confident in moving forward with this that we're going to be good to go. In the year that we're recording this, the imported Swiss and Schutzen black powder has been a lifesaver for muzzleloading enthusiasts, so I'd like to thank them for continuing to import powder through the last couple years here that would have been kind of crazy. I've got my loading block here with a few balls. My short starter went somewhere. There it is. Here I've got my loading block with my 495 round balls. And we'll just go ahead and press this home. I want to say too here real quick that it's very important that we leave this sitting unprimed. Modern safety practices really encourage us to do so. So if you're coming in from your hunt, please remove the 209 primer from your muzzleloader, remove the percussion cap from your muzzleloader, or with this Flintlock muzzleloader, dump the priming powder out of your priming pan to make sure that you're leaving this set in a safe manner. We don't want any loaded muzzleloaders setting that could go off, you know, if there's a kid around camp, if a raccoon gets a little handsy, you never know. We just want to make sure that we're practicing and enjoying muzzleloaders safely. As we conduct this test, I'll pull up the weather data for each day at my location. I will say it's a blustery mid-October day. We just had a nice rain last night, and we're just about at 40 degrees as we're recording here. So the conditions are going to vary. Like I said, we're in the Midwest here, so we do have a little bit of humidity in the air this time of year. So that might vary. So, I mean, don't take this test as gospel. I really encourage you to do this test on your own if you're very concerned about doing this kind of thing. You don't want to pull up on that trophy buck for the year and have a load not go off. So, you know, while this is a fun test to do, and I'm happy that you're watching and I hope you're enjoying it, it's always important to conduct your own testing in your own area with your own materials and conditions to get a really accurate test for you. Admittedly, this has been about 29 hours. It took me a little bit longer today to get out to the range here than I expected. So I just want to be upfront about that. This isn't an exact 24-hour result test. After I finished the loading for this muzzleloader, the weather conditions really went downhill. We saw an afternoon, an evening, and an all night of rainy, wet drizzle, sleet. It tried to snow a little bit here, but we didn't have anything stick to the ground, as you can see here. So the conditions changed a little bit. Take that into account with the results as we fire this muzzleloader. Take my 4F priming powder here. Just to note for the video, there's some moisture on the pan, and I'm wiping that away with my thumb. That's just from being out, I imagine. Closing my priming horn, sticking it in a pocket so that it is nice and away from the ignition. Okay, so we have one flash. Our priming pan out. I really flinched on that one a little bit there. It's kind of embarrassing for me. We're all learning, you know. Okay, we got another pan of priming powder here. Take it back, bring it back to full cock. Okay. Huh, I hit the silhouette. That's fun. Even with that hang fire. So with our second primed pan, we were able to get our Swiss 3F powder to go off after sitting out on a really damp, dark day. I'm interested, I'm kind of curious to see if we had the same muzzleloader loaded up at the same time in the same conditions, if we had picked the vent, if that would have changed anything or not. I don't really know. I know the vent was clear. I picked it before we set it and before we let it set overnight. So we know it was clear, but I'm wondering with a little bit of moisture that was on the pan if there would have been any difference. Still, the second priming for that shot we were able to get to go off, which for traditional black powder, we always hear that it can't go through any conditions. You know, it's kind of neat to see. What we're gonna do next is we're gonna line this up, we're gonna load it up and let it set for 3 days with the same load in the same outdoor conditions as we can experience here to see if there's any difference. For this bore, because I don't want to sacrifice the bore of this rifle, for the sake of this test, we're going to run a few cleaning patches down to make sure that our bore is nice and clean and we're not going to cause any unnecessary damage to the bore and thus the accuracy of this rifle due to this test. So I've got some cleaning patches here. I'm going to be using Shenandoah Valley muzzleloader patch lube and cleaner. It's just something I have handy. I can use just about anything to clean my muzzleloaders, I find, and I'm not super picky about it. So I encourage you, if you can't find what you normally clean with, check it out and try something new. These muzzleloaders aren't as picky, I find, as some folks make them out to be, which, you know, no shade being cast there. Muzzleloading can be difficult for people. I'm not knocking that at all. It is a learning curve for sure. So wow, one shot of our Swiss 3F black powder, and that is the first patch that we've pulled out of there. That is the poster child for a muzzleloading cleaning patch right there. Kind of neat when you compare that to like the 777 test. We did the same thing, looked at that patch. So this one might take a few more patches. Now you can skip over this if you aren't interested in this part of the process. I'm showing you this to be transparent with the test so that you can see what I'm doing and why, and compare some of the variables that go into place when you're working with muzzleloaders. This test, I've got my pre-measured amount of Swiss 3F black powder in this Cedar Mountain quick loader here. We've got a nice spout, pour our powder down in there, get our ball from our ball board, get our range rod here and press it home. We're gonna leave this sit unprimed for the next 3 days and we'll come back to see if it fires. We're back on the range this morning after a full 3 days in between our last test. I have to say these were some of the nicest days I think we've had really this year. Placing the rifle on half cock, we have our muzzle pointed down range. There's nothing down range here that this can go off and hit except for a nice berm. I'm gonna prime our pan, put my priming horn in my pocket, cover up my pocket with my shirt there. You'll notice a lot of times when I'm shooting flintlocks, I tap back here at the wrist. This is just to level out the priming powder in the pan. I find that it makes for a more consistent burn, but your mileage may vary, of course. Okay, so we had quite a bit of a hang fire there, but it did go off with the first shot. Now, that is very different compared to what we saw with the 1-day test. Just off the cuff here, I'm attributing that to the weather conditions. We didn't have any rain, any moisture, no frost or anything the past few days. So I think that lends itself to the advantage of the black powder here. Wasn't really any moisture out there. So we did get it to go off with the first pan. We did have a noticeable delay though. So that's something that comes back to practicing with your muzzleloader and with your flintlock. I know I need a lot of it still, but practice so you can hold through those hang fires. You want to have that follow through just like you would if you were shooting you know, trap or skeet or something. You want to have the same kind of follow through with your flintlock. Again, I have a lot of room to improve there, so I'm not trying to say that you need to shoot like I do. I have a lot of work to go, but that's the kind of skill that I think many of us can continue to practice with our flintlocks so that we can hold through those possible hang fires if you're shooting the next day after loading or a few days after loading, and then you can have a more accurate shot and a more ethical take for whatever game you're hunting. What we're going to do next is we're going to load this up with the same Swiss 3F black powder. We're gonna let it sit for 7 days. We're down to just a little bit of fouling in there now, something I'm not too worried about. You can see there just a little bit of black, but for the purposes of this test, I think that's pretty good, really. We have our pre-measured charge here of Swiss 3F black powder. This is in the Cedar Mountain quick loader here that we've been testing. Drop it down, flip it up, give it a couple taps there. We have our 495 patched round ball with some RMC Ox Yolks Wonder Lube that we're using here. Now we're gonna let this sit for a full 7 days to emulate that. Went hunting on the weekend, gotta go back to work, can hunt again on the weekend. And we'll see how this performs. Will there be more hang time or less, do you think? I think it's gonna, personally, I think it's gonna depend on the weather conditions here, but I'm interested to see how this plays out. Been a full 7 days now since we last shot this muzzleloader, and I have to say, weather-wise, it was kind of a roller coaster. We went from fall to winter to spring, back to fall. A little bit of some summer temps in there too, which is kind of interesting. Okay, that's one. Another gnarly flinch there on my part. The flint is striking well. I'm impressed with that. We've got that machine cut agate in there, which a lot of people say is junk, but it's been performing pretty well for me so far. Okay, so that's two. No strike there out of the flint. Getting a little bit of buildup on it. So I'm gonna kind of clean that with my finger a little bit. Kind of funny, I was talking about how well the agate was doing, and then it whiffs on me. Okay, now we're not sparking at all. Got my muzzle pointed downrange in a safe direction here. There's nothing that, if this had a real super delayed ignition, there's nothing downrange that it could hit. It's all berms and targets down here. What I'm doing is I'm rubbing the frizzen and the underside of the flint a little bit here to make sure I don't have any buildup. That's kind of one of the first things that you want to do in this situation. Make sure that everything is dry. Okay. So muzzle pointed in a safe direction here. We're going to place this on half cock, dumping my pan out. We're going to get out a vent pick. Okay, so in cleaning the vent there just now, I had what felt like some kind of little crust right at the end or the start of my touch hole from the inside. So if that is maybe a little bit of moisture got in there and sealed up the powder, perhaps at the start of the touch hole. Regardless, there's something in there that had happened, perhaps chemically with the moisture, that sealed up that touch hole, I feel like. So I'm interested now to see if we can go off now that we've broken through what felt like a little bit of crust. We continue Flintlock troubleshooting here with Ethan, and what I'm going to do is get out the appropriately sized screwdriver. Perhaps this is another learning moment for us. You can see there a little bit on that agate, this front end, my left-hand side, is the end that we've been shooting from. It's the end of the flint that has been the working end. Look at that and kind of straight on there as much as you can in comparison to the side on my right-hand side, how crisp that line is. So whether you're shooting with an agate or if you're shooting with an English flint or a French flint, that's the kind of thing you want to start looking out for after taking a few shots with your flint. This agate performs a bit differently than the flint does. Okay. We have ignition on the lock. Okay. We have a hit on the chicken, and it did go off. You'll notice we had a bit of a hang fire there, but we did get this to go off after sitting for quite a long time and quite a few hang fires. I'll admit here, our 3F black powder test at the 7 days did not go as smoothly as I'd wanted it to. I'm sorry about that. We didn't have more consistency compared to the other muzzleloading powders that we've tested here, but I hope that still provides a little bit of information for you as to how the Flintlock loaded with 3F black powder can set for an entire week, can still go off, but you're going to expect, I think, some difficulty, which many of us do expect. But this kind of puts that, you know, on paper, so to speak, for us to check out and kind of visualize as far as the test goes. Looking back on it, I should have, after the first clutch, flipped an agate or my flint around, and I should have used a vent pick, I think, to start. But I wanted to go through just picking it up and going to the woods with it, as we would have in the other 2 days of the test. We didn't pick the vent necessarily. We didn't flip the flint around. So I hope there is some consistency there, but I do wish it would have gone a little more smoothly to better emulate the rest of the tests that we've done here. All in all, I am still impressed with the black powder, you know, being out in the environments here. It's done well for humanity for a few hundred years now, and it continues to do so, even in the most archaic of firearms, not necessarily, but in the Flintlock muzzleloader, we still have decent performance. We still hit the chicken a couple times after letting the powder set. So we still have an accurate load coming out of the rifle, even though it's sat for a little bit. Would I want to take that bet on a trophy buck? It kind of goes back and forth for me. I'm curious as to what you would do, but I can't really say. I might, if I was going for one day and the weather conditions were good, I might take that chance. But anything after that, I think I would try to dump the load or empty the bore, really, to make sure I had the best shot and go out with a clean load in the morning. I don't want you to take this as gospel and just run with it. I want you to use this and the kind of the tests we do on the channel at ilovemuzzleloading.com as one data point for you to reference, to go out and test your own muzzleloading equipment and talk with your buddies and their muzzleloaders and talk on the forums and things, and be a part of the community and share this stuff. I do not offer anything on the website or on the channel as an end-all be-all. I offer it as a single data point for us all to kind of reference and maybe learn from if you're kind of at my level here where you're still learning. So that's really all I have for you this week. Check out some of the other tests if you're interested in some of the black powder substitutes and other kinds of muzzleloaders out there. I think after this, we need to do a traditional black powder test in a cap lock muzzleloader, perhaps our tradition's St. Louis Hawken, to see if there's any difference. You know, is that cap mechanism a little bit more atmosphere weatherproof than the Flintlock mechanism that we have here? I don't know. Might be something for a future video. Once again, I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you next time.